Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Backstep. This is Ronnie K in New York. And that good-looking fella with that big bushy stash, that's my man, Tommy Aurnhammer from New Mexico. What's happening, brother?
Won first place in the Billy Goldfeder lookalike contest.
Nice. Yeah, you wish. Actually, I think when you look at Billy, you don't. You can't see his teeth. I could see your teeth, but it's like it's down to here, But in any event, I know last week you went to the IAAI conference in New Mexico, right? Right? Is that correct?
Yes. The state chapter did their annual training conference down in Albuquerque.
Did you learn anything?
Yeah, never park your car in Albuquerque.
Well, what happened? Did you get towed?
No, mine didn't get stolen, but they tend to be the stolen car capital of the Southwest.
No kidding. I didn't know that. You know, my sister lived there for 40 years. She never told me that. Wow.
No, it was good. We had Dr. Elaine Pope, forensic anthropologist, and doing a lot of stuff on investigating fire fatalities. She did a great presentation. And a few of the other folks popped in, had ATF do some stuff. Bureau of Land Management did some wildland fire investigation stuff. It was a good show. It really a good opportunity to get your continuing ed points knocked out.
Gotcha. Now you need continuing ed as a member of the IAAI?
I need it for my certification as a fire investigator.
From them? From them? Or from the state?
They're the certifying agency, but it's also pro board accredited.
Oh, okay. I got you. All right, good, cool. Sounds like a blast. No pun intended. Pun intended.
The cert's good for 5 years, and I think I may apply for the retired designation when this one expires.
Sounds like we're getting there.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, as some of the folks know, and or maybe don't know, Tommy and I have been on the air for 15 years doing podcasts. We started just with a phone call. We'd be on the phone with each other recording that. And then it went to a kind of like a studio kind of phone call, and then kind of morphed into this podcast where you can actually see us and get nauseous, So, we're on. This is our farewell tour. We're doing it 15 years. Tommy, as you know, is retired as a career chief, and I'm looking at the exit door from FDNY probably within the next 12 months, and 15 years is a good run. And we covered a lot of ground, had some great guests on. Last month, don't watch that show. We had Chief Dave McGlynn on. He's a federal fire chief up at Letterkenny in Pennsylvania, the Letterkenny Army Depot, 25-year veteran. He's big on training. He's got a couple of books out for fire engineering. Big training dude. And we had a really good conversation with Dave about a lot of stuff, and a lot of it centered around, what does the new Proby look like, and how do you get through to the young people? And we know the old guys got to do some changing too, and how to meet them halfway. And so we had a really good conversations with Dave. So if you didn't see it, go back and take a look. And we're going to have other guests on. We're inviting a handful of the current podcasters from fire engineering as part of our farewell tour. And next month we'll have a nice surprise for you. You'll see who we have on. You're going to want to tune in next month, that's for sure, because we got two of the most lunatic type guys that have been working together, and who we know, and it'll be that'll be another. Well, it's almost a full Jersey because one guy's not from Jersey, but we're gonna outnumber him 3-1. So we'll take care of that.
I think Duffy wants to be from New Jersey.
Yeah, it could be. Now, you see, you gave it away. You said the word Duffy. You had to give it. Now it's not a surprise anymore. So we will have Jim Duffy.
Disregard my last.
Yeah. Disregard that he said Duffy because he works with Avillo. This will disregard Avillo also. So we're going to have Duffy and Avillo on together. and between the four of us, it'll be complete mayhem, and everybody's going to talk over each other, and it's going to be screaming and yelling and laughing, and it'll be a really good time. So that's what we want to do. We want to make it a little bit fun sometimes, and today we're talking about something serious, and everything I think has a serious note to it, but it's worth talking about. Everything is worth talking about, the good stuff, the bad stuff, because we can make the bad stuff better, but by taking some action and doing some cool things. So, Tom, you want to start us off tonight?
Yeah, we're going to talk about NIOSH, line of duty death reports, and how they relate to a training tool for all of us to use out there. And I got to tell you that doing some research on the subject and using AI to dig up some of the stuff, if you're a training guy and you're not using AI, tell me why not. I know there's controversy surrounded by it, but I figure if I'm not using it to do my homework, I'm okay. And if we're talking about firefighter safety, I think you should be able to just go and grab whatever is going to get the message across to the troops. And if using AI is going to do that for you, go do it. It's an amazing tool, and I think it's going to change the way we do training in the fire service. But whenever I think about NIOSH line of duty death reports, there's two things that really kind of jump out at me. The first is the quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." As I found out through AI, that the original quote was, "Those who cannot learn from the past are condemned to repeat it." So same idea that's out there. There's a couple different guys that are credited with doing the quote, but the whole thing is learning lessons. And the lessons are being presented not only by those who made the supreme sacrifice, but also the people who are putting the reports together and basically handing you all the information you need to put together a decent training on that. And that's just phenomenal. The other quote that always comes to mind was credited to Einstein. And insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And unfortunately, the NIOSH line of duty death reports, if you look at them, we're not finding any new ways to kill ourselves. It's a lot of... Good.
You hit it on the head, brother, because we've been talking about this for a long time. I started looking at NIOSH reports and line of duty reports 30 years ago. Being 30 years ago, I was a new chief, and then, of course, through my chiefdom, if you will, in a few different places, kept up on all of that. And we kept looking at it and talking about it, saying it's the same shit all over again. If you look at the final recommendations in the NIOSH reports, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's command and control. It's accountability. It's communications. It's the same stuff over and over again. So when do we get to that point where, like, okay, we got this? I don't know. I don't know. And Einstein, excuse me, Tommy, the Einstein quote, we use that all through the Everyone Goes Home program and all the safety stuff that we talk about. Safety, it's like doing the same thing. If you think you're going to get away with it, you're only going to get away with so long. Okay, we had an engine crash this morning in Brooklyn. Okay, and it resulted in the fatality of a passenger in a van. So now we don't have any other details other than that. We don't know who had the light. We don't know what happened. We know they were responding to a box, but with all of that, if we think that we're not going to get hurt or worse when we get into an apparatus crash, that's doing the same thing over again and expecting something different to happen. You got to buckle up when you're in the rig, So we're talking about this stuff for a long time, and I don't know how do we fix it.
I was reminded again this morning Billy G had posted some stuff on the secret list, and one of them is a NIOSH report that just came out. And I didn't go through it with the fine tooth comb, but just the synopsis sounded like there might have been some miscue between getting water and vent going at the same time, may have created a flow path that caused them, among other factors, to not be able to exit the building. And I mean, that's stuff we've been talking about ever since Madrikowski and Kerber have been trying to tune us into fire dynamics. And you got to think about that when you're doing stuff, because there's a consequence on the other side of every action you make.
There you go. And you were very gracious just now saying we're talking about it since Madrikowski and Kerber. But you and I have been talking about it since Lloyd Lehman.
God bless.
And all the young people said, who the hell's Lloyd Lehman, right? Everybody, you all said that out there, right? In TV land. Who the hell's Lloyd Lehman? Look him up. Look him up. He was one of the godfathers of our business who talked about a lot of stuff like this.
I got one of my favorite Lloyd Lehman stories was, and I think you were there for part of it. Were you up in Telluride when Ronnie Coleman came out?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm having a conversation.
I flew back with Ronnie out of Telluride International. We went back to Denver.
Oh, okay. So I'm having a conversation with Ronnie, who another one of my mystery mentors. He didn't know it, but he had a hell of a lot of influence on my path. But I was trying to find a copy of Lehman's book. Extinguishing Interior Fires, I think, was the first one. And I found one. The guy wanted like $500 for it. And I was like, no, I'm just going to have to not use quotes out of the text. Well, I was telling Ronnie I couldn't find one. I hadn't been home a week. And guess what shows up in the mail?
I'm not surprised.
A copy out of his library. And I'm like, surprised. That's the kind of guy Ronnie Coleman was.
Yep. We were sitting on that I think it was a Ford Excursion with a propeller bringing us back to Denver Airport from your place. You guys never flew into Telluride, Colorado. It's a treat. So it's a Ford Excursion with a propeller on it, right? So we're heading back. We're having just a rip-roaring conversation, and I had just got done with one of my books, and he just got done with one. I said we shook on the plane. All right, I'll mail you mine. You mail me yours. So we did the exchange, and it was great. It was great, and ironically, when he passed, I sent his wife a card with a little note in it, that I had met him, and we more than once, for FDIC for years, and the kind of guy he was. And she sent me back a really nice letter with the kind of the funeral pamphlet, if you will, with his picture on it, and a couple of other things, and it was kind of nice to get back that acknowledgement from his wife. But yeah, guy left his mark. There's no doubt. He left his mark on the fire in the country,
So I got to thinking when we, kind of picked this as our subject matter this month of how did this program evolve into what it is today? And it's like everything else. You need to know where you came from in order to get to where you're going. And
absolutely.
1970, United States passed the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Welcome to OSHA. And I didn't realize it was in the 70s. I thought it might have been a little longer than that. Well, during they focused on worker safety, but they didn't do it by occupation. It was just kind of a broad stroke of, you need to do this and this. But in 1980s, they began conducting occupational fatality investigations through a broader program called FACE, Fatality Assessment and Control Evaluation. In these early investigations, there were some firefighter fatalities that they looked at, but they didn't have the focus that they've got today with the program. So the creation of the Firefighter Fatality Investigation and Prevention Program came about in 1998 when it got specific to investigate firefighter line of duty deaths. I remember at the time this came about, and the IAFF was a true proponent of trying to get this passed. And they did a lot of work on being able to set this aside as its own program, if you would. But the purpose of the program that they had come up with was to investigate firefighter LODD incidents, identify the contributing factors that are there, and produce recommendations to prevent similar deaths. Sounds kind of simple, but you got to start somewhere. The key characteristics of the program that they kind of created was that the reports are non-regulatory. They don't assign blame or assess penalties. So they try to keep a kind of a level of neutrality in there. Departments have to agree to participate voluntarily. It's not something that's going to get forced down their throat. And the reports are published publicly for training and safety use. The program kind of expanded in the 2000s. Typically, the investigation process included scene visits, very important, interviews with firefighters and command staff, and a review of SOP training records, medical data, apparatus maintenance, and then an examination of PPE or SCBA if it's relevant to the line of duty death. So in about 2010, the program saw some growth and influence in what they were recommending. It really became the most influential safety resource for the United States Fire Service. And identifying reoccurring issues, which we had just talked about, lack of accountability systems is number one. Incident command breakdowns, inadequate risk assessment, firefighter health and fitness issues, and influence standards from organizations such as the NFPA or the IAFF. So they've investigated hundreds of fatalities, and they managed to cover probably about 39% of the line of duty deaths that occur. They still can't get to all of them. But the reports are kind of structured to be able to present you the information. One of the things I like to use them for was coffee table training. If you got the guys in the firehouse sitting around, hey, let's take a look at some of this stuff. And the format that they do now, there's an executive summary, which if you want to do a quick read, that's there. An overview of the incident, timelines, very important to try to identify what went right, what went not so right. Fireground conditions, contributing factors, and then the NIOSH recommendations. The thing that amazed me for all the years that I've been looking at these things, I think probably the most common problem is with communications.
Yes.
And it's not so much the technical end of that. I think we got radios that work, but it's like the old World War II adage: if you see something, say something. And I think we're moving towards that part in our culture where you've heard the expression of everybody's a safety officer. And I think we're getting better at doing that stuff, but we're still not anywhere near where we need to be.
Yeah, I've seen the change. I mean, I think it's getting better. Well, it also came with the fact that like when we started the grant program back 25 years ago about every firefighter should have a radio for the interest of safety. So now we give everybody gets one, so to speak. So at least everybody has an opportunity. Then you have to learn radio discipline, of course. Which is hard to do. I was
did Chatty Cathy work at your department?
Who?
Chatty
Cathy.
Cathy.
Yeah, Chatty Cathy. Everybody department had a Chatty. I was Chatty Cathy and I was younger, but you have to learn that radio discipline and teach the guys and gals how to listen rather than to speak, unless they need to speak up. Just listen to the radio. Listen to what's going on. You got a unit on the third floor of the house of a 3-story frame, and you hear them saying, "We see there's fire up here. It's extending from the second floor, and we don't have any water." Okay, or we're knocking it down, or we hear a kid crying. So do we need more personnel up there to try to do a search for that kid? So listening to your radio, and everybody, maybe your water pressure's bad and they can't get a hold of the chauffeur down in the street. So maybe somebody else hears it and walks over and says, "Hey, give them another twist. Give them another twist, will you? Because they don't have enough water," or whatever it is. So I think that's getting better because we've taken our communication systems and spread them out more. More people have radios. Technically, you said our radios work. Yeah, that's going to be debatable. We're going to have 800 guys coming into the screen to give you a punch in the nose on that one because in a lot of places they just don't. We have radio problems in a lot of places. It's better. It's better, but there are still places. You go into big steel buildings, whether it's a high rise or an arena or whatever it is, and then you're inside. You could talk to each other. You can't get out. The commanders in the street can't hear you, and all this other stuff. There's a million things going on with radios, but I think we're on a better trend for communication. Technology, of course, is always evolving, and and again, our folks, we're trying to get everybody a radio, so that helps. I think, especially from the safety side, that makes sense to me. What I've seen, and I don't know who thought. I'd love to say it was my idea. I guess I can. Who's going to argue with me, right? But I'm a credit where credit's due kind of a guy. So I don't know who thought of it, but probably I'm going to go back 15 to 20 years. Somebody at a fire academy said, "Let's give out the NIOSH reports to the probies and the rookies, and have them. Each kid gets one because unfortunately there's enough. So you have 30 kids in a class. They all get one. And they have to do research on it and do a 10-minute presentation to the class about that line of duty and prevention." I thought that was a phenomenal thing to do as part of their 12, 14, 16, 18-week curriculum. Today we're going to talk about safety, health, line of duty injuries, line of duty deaths. We're going to look at case histories. You're all going to get one, and you're all going to report back. I thought that was a great idea. I don't know where it came from, who thought of it. Everybody will take credit for it down the road sometime. I think I won't because it wasn't my idea, but I used it. I certainly used it. Tommy, did you come across that in your neck of the woods out there in the West? Are they doing stuff like that?
Where I had really seen them relied upon is in the National Fire Academy's Incident Safety Officer class.
Yeah, I taught that course for a good couple of years, and we used them there a lot. But I you know what? Now that you say that, because I taught the incident safety officer, and there was another one, incident management. It was a 6-day job, and loved teaching that class. And I think one of the guys in the class, now that you mentioned it, 15 years ago or so, said, we give these out to the kids in probie school to make them report out on these. I said, that's a genius idea. I don't know where he was from. Don't know which guy said it, but I think I got it from the NFA. Like we get a lot of good gems from the NFA. Needless to say, right?
So one of the things I came across when I was doing a little research on this is a line of duty death report training template. It's free. It doesn't cost nothing. All you got to do is get onto your computer and look for it. Oops, here we go.
The report training template. Oh, so tell me about that. I haven't seen that. What is that?
the template is basically created for you to put together your lesson plan for making sure that the training gets done. It recommends a title slide, just what you're doing, what the case study is, uh, objectives, key factors that contributed to the fatality, understand the challenges from tactical and command, apply the lessons learned at the line of duty death to your own department. Can that happen in your current assignment? Well, yeah, we all know that it can. And then recognize warning signs that increase firefighter risk. What are we doing? What direction's the fire heading? Is it invented? All those things to consider. Then presenting a incident overview of the fatality. Initial dispatch, building environment, and a lot of times we don't think about building construction unless we're doing a walkthrough, but it's got to come into play on the fire ground. And what did Brannigan say? You got to know your enemy, and your enemy is the building.
Building's your enemy. Know your enemy. That's what he said. Yep. Hold on a second, Tom. So the same guys and gals who said, "Who the hell's Lloyd Lehman?" Now they just said, "Who the hell's Brannigan?" Okay, if you don't have your own copy of Frank or Francis L. Brannigan's Construction for the Fire Service, it's in this. I believe it's in the 5th or the 6th edition by now. Francis died a few years ago, but our resident genius, Glenn Corbett from Fire Engineering Magazine, and he is a resident genius. He completed the 5th edition, I believe, with Frank while he was sick. And after he passed, he did a 6th edition. Corbett's the guy. So reach out, go to Fire Engineering, get Building Construction for the Fire Service by Brannigan/Corbett, and read it cover to cover. Because Brannigan, again, his thing was the building is your enemy, know your enemy. Should be required reading for every probie/rookie in the United States when they're going to school. Read this book cover to cover.
You know, it was one of the things, I really didn't become a student of this stuff till I had been in it for a couple of years. But, you read some of the stuff that has such impact on the way you go about running a job that, and the geniuses are out there. Brannigan was certainly probably one of the most prolific. Vinnie Dunn on the collapse of burning buildings. Manny Freed, Fire Grant Tactics. And I laugh because I can go back and look at some of the old stuff. And as long as you adjust for staffing, we're still doing the same stuff.
It's pretty interesting.
I think it was Bernasini that said, the only thing fire understands is the proper application and amount of water, and it's physics. And he said, there's a reason why they're called the laws of physics and not the suggestions of physics.
One of my favorite Bernasini quotes. They're the laws of physics, not the suggestions of physics. I saw Vinny in October. We hosted FDNY hosted a national high-rise symposium, 3 days in Manhattan. And we honored the chiefs of the past who ran the last one 30 years ago. And Vinny came and we gave him a nice trophy. Him and Jerry Tracy was one of them. Chief Ed Butler, there was like 6 or 8 of them. But Vinny was there, and he's 84. He's 84. He's retired a long time. And he went and he sat in the front row, and he had a book and a pad open. He was just like Guston. Guston is, as long as Bill Guston was in the service and as much teaching as he did, at FDIC, he'd be sitting in a class with his little notebook out and his pencil. And just absolutely amazing. And what's his name? Our good friend Paul Combs, the cartoon guy. He did a thing for Bill last year. He did a cartoon of an open notebook and a pencil and his glasses and Bill's glasses on an empty seat in the FDIC ballroom, so like as a tribute. But Vinny's 84, and he went to classes that on that Friday at the Marriott in Midtown Manhattan. So I gotta let me deaden that phone so we don't get another
1075 in the Bronx.
no, but that was a fireman from the Bronx who's a friend of mine, and I'm going up there. I'm going up tomorrow. I'm meeting with the 6th Division chiefs, and he works in that firehouse. I said, "You're going to be working tomorrow," so he is. So now I got to bring cake, you know. But,
Don't show up empty-handed.
Can't walk in empty-handed without a box with string around it, you know. Box has to have string around it. So, but anyway,
the other pieces of the template certainly are looking at the timeline of events as well as contributing factors. And we see a lot of them repeat themselves again. No incident command structure, breakdown in communication, structural collapse, lack of situational awareness, inadequate risk assessment, and crew integrity lost. Stuff that, and we'll talk about certain incidents here before we go away tonight, but those key operational issues should be jumping out at you and definitely require a piece of the template if you're doing training. Was ICS established? Did you have a safety officer on scene? Any accountability? Par checks conducted? Have you got an accountability system that works? Because some do and some don't. And strategy versus risk. Are you going offensive or defensive? You got to make that call, especially if you're running the show. The next item is NIOSH's recommendations. And again, that's a pretty important part of the report. And it's highlighted in its own area if you look at them. And then obviously they need to be factored into the training that you're going to present. And then lessons for your department. What did we take away from this in order to make ourselves safer? There's also a couple of items in there about maybe running a tabletop scenario. Is to say you're the first driving engine at a 2-story residential. You got heavy fire showing from the 2nd floor. You can just do it with radios sitting around the table. What's your initial radio report going to be? What's your strategy? What resources did you request? And when's the time to pull the plug on an offensive operation, get them out of the building and go defensive? We got to talk about this stuff. Trying to learn that on the fire ground is not really a bright idea. You got to,
and I think what happens is we get, and it comes in cycles. We get bogged down with all the other stuff, with whether it's for a long time when incident command was coming up, everybody said if you don't have a vest on, you can't fight the fire. Remember that? The guys that used to make fun. If you're not wearing a vest, how could you put the fire out? That kind of stuff. So it's stuff. It cycles, but we do get, the fire service has evolved into an all hazards gang. We do hazmat and and all the other shit that's been thrown at us over the years, and we never say no. Really, we say yeah, we'll do that. And so we forget the basics, and we ended up, every fire department, every once in a while says, all right, we're doing back to basics for the month of June. We're going to hit a hydrant, stretch a line, put a ladder up to the 2nd floor window, because that's the meat and potatoes and the bread and butter. And the fire departments, they fall out of that because we're doing, required bloodborne pathogen training and EMS and all the other. And then, the basic bread and butter of the fire department is, to get a water supply and get a line between the fire and the people. And some departments, they just forget how to do it, because they don't do it that often or they don't practice it enough. But there's something to be said. I mean, you still have to make the attempt. I remember Donnie Mano talking about this at FDIC one year when he had the stage, and he said his truck company, where he was a fireman, he says they drilled putting ladders up to windows. That was their drill. Respond out of the firehouse for a drill. Respond out, lights and sirens. The officer would tell the driver, stop at this address. Boom. Get out. Ladder the building. And he said, we practiced the hell out of that. He says, we were doing it with our eyes closed. He said, and we had a fire 4 doors down from the firehouse. Got out, did it all, and we still lost 3 people in the house. And then we sat around saying, well, why are we drilling and why are we trying to get good at this? It didn't matter. But that was the exception to the rule. That was the anomaly of the fire having so much headway. By the time they got there, they couldn't rescue anybody. But I asked them afterwards, I says, but were you effective at the other 2,000 fires you went to after that? And he said, absolutely. I said, okay. So I think the point to his story that day to the audience was, even though you practice and you get really good at some things, basic stuff, once in a while, it's not going to work, no matter what you do. And one of the burdens that we've carried forever was we carried a burden of a civilian injury or a civilian death. You ask any firefighter who went through a fatal fire, and here's what they're going to say: we lost X, we lost 2 people, we lost 2 kids, we lost. We didn't start the fire. Billy Joel wrote a great song called "We Didn't Start the Fire." And we didn't. I mean, it's not our fault. We didn't start the fire. We weren't there from the very, very beginning. And the clock ticks. And now the clock ticks a lot faster than it used to tick because of the interior furnishings and the hydrocarbon-based materials. So, we lost. That's not what we should be saying. I don't think so. That's Ron's opinion. We didn't lose anybody. We made a valiant attempt to save their life, but however long it took us to get there, and as long as we believed we operated in good faith and in a timely manner, we didn't lose anybody. It's
a heavy burden of being responsible for fire safety in your community, and you can lead a horse to water, but sometimes it's tough to make them drink, and as long as, from my standpoint, if there's not a line of duty death associated with it, it's a win.
Well, you know what? It's funny you said that, because as you're talking, I think it was, I'm going to say between 3 and 4 or 5 months ago. Could it be between 3, 4, and 5 months ago? I don't think it can be. Between what he wanted to say was between 3 to 5 months ago, Dave Rhodes wrote an editorial, and he said, just because nobody got hurt, meaning our people, doesn't mean the operation went well. He said, and I forgot what he called it, and I sent him a note, and I shared that article with my safety chief in the job. I says, you got to read what this guy wrote about, because we all did. I did it as a chief. The operation went horribly wrong, but nobody got hurt. We're good. But we use that. That's really, and Dave brought to the forefront, and he's a smart guy, and he was right. He brought to the forefront that just because someone didn't get hurt doesn't mean the operation went well at all.
No,
it doesn't validate that because nobody got. We're grateful, we're happy as shit, but it doesn't mean things went great. But we do, the fire service, we do that all the time. I did it as a chief. Say, all right, that was all screwed up, but nobody got hurt. Well, let's go on to the next. It's not right. You got to sit and critique and figure out what you did wrong, because if you keep doing it wrong, that's when it's going to come back to bite you in the ass when you're not thinking about it.
Good point. Dave's a smart man.
He is. I'll encourage our watchers and listeners to go back a couple of months and look at the editor's opinion in the front page of the magazine within the last 3 to 5 months, and it talks about. And I wish I could quote what he said in there, but basically what he said is, because no one got hurt doesn't validate that everything went great. And I think he's right. Not because he runs this whole thing and we want to stay on the air a couple of more months. I'm not saying it because of that. But he's a deep thinker. Dave's a deep thinker. When you read his opinions every month, he's got some shit going on up there. That's for sure. So
So the next thing I just wanted to kind of bring up, and it reminded me of you, Ron. Somebody put together the 10 NIOSH reports that every firefighter should study. And it reminded me of the book that you were getting ready to have published. And if you wouldn't mind, let me pick on you a little bit and give us a breakdown of what you're working on and maybe a timeline on when it's coming out.
Oh, come on. Why are you picking on me, man? Don't pick on me. So I started this. You get one idea, and it's like going on the internet. Let me look that up, and then before you know it, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. But I started doing a historic fires bulletin for the job. Pick a historic fire: the Iroquois Theater, the Brooklyn Theater fire, Coconut Grove nightclub, whatever. And like a one-page sheet, and I did a nice little border in purple, which kind of apropos, and basically, type of occupancy, number of fatalities, basic cause, and then a little write-up paragraph. And we published 3 or 4 of them. And then when I left the training group that I was with, they kind of continued to do it on a limited basis. They put out another couple, and then they forgot about it, but that's okay. So from that, I was compiling historic fires, and I compiled about 20 or 30 of them. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to keep going. So what I did was I compiled 70 fires from 1800 to 2025 in the U.S. and abroad, where more than 20 people got killed in a fire. And the 20 is an arbitrary number. It's the number I picked. Not that if 12 or 15 people got killed in a fire, it wasn't a big deal. But I used 20. And I have 70 fires, and I did it the same way. The type of occupancy, and even I have 2 tables of contents in the book. I have fires listed as 1 to 70. They're not chapters; they're fires. It'll say fire 1, fire 2 instead of chapter 1, chapter 2. In date order. It's in date order, chronological order. And then I did a separate one by category of occupancy. I put all the public assembly fires together, all the manufacturing, industrial fires together, et cetera, et cetera. And what happened, cause and effect. And then at the end of each fire, I talk about, did that fire change the codes, the building and fire codes? And if so, what was it? And did it change the way we fight fires? Okay. And so that's kind of my new piece. It's called The Fires That Took 12,000 Lives. 12,800 people get killed in this book. And it's not just for the fire prevention guy. It's not for the fire marshal. They can use it, but the fire chief should read it, and teachers, history buffs, people who own nightclubs and high-rise buildings. I have a couple of high-rise jobs. So it's an all-around, and they're hoping to get it out by the end of the summer or by the fall. I told them it would make a good fit for Fire Prevention Week for October. So that's kind of the hope, but we'll see. But, we're in the hands of fire engineering, books and videos. There's a bunch of them in front of me that they're working on right now. I'm in queue. It's been proofed and been peer review has been done, and now it's going to go to layout. So I think sometime right after FDIC, they're going to try to lay it out, and then they got to get it to the printer, and he's out of ink, and he can't find paper, and there's a million things going on. So what can I tell you? But thank you for asking, Tom. But I'm proud of all the stuff that I've done, and this one I'm kind of proud of because it tells our story. It tells our story of where we, like you said, you got to know where you've been before you know where you can go. This is our history, these big fires. And that's, that it rings true that the codes in this country and everywhere are written in blood. And my good friend and mentor, Jim Murtaugh, who I talked about more than once on this show, he said that we practice tombstone legislation in this country, so, and I heard that when I was a 17-year-old freshman in college from Jim. Tombstone legislation. So this book, my hope for the book is to give the readers that background, that history of where we've been and what some of the bad things that have happened and how we try to fix it, and to also it's a gift to me. It's a gift to the fire marshals, the fire inspectors, and fire chiefs of the country to when they want to pass legislation or new rules. Like let's retrofit sprinkler all nightclubs because of what's going on in nightclubs. Like, we're having these bad, and they have a whole bunch of them that they can use as case histories to put up in front of their town council to say, hey, we don't want to have this in this town. So that's my new gig. That's what I'm working on.
So the top 10 list that I came across The first one is the Charleston Sofa Superstore fire, in which 9 firefighters lost their lives in that commercial occupancy. Got anything you want to talk about in particular about that fire run, or?
Just so the audience knows, and you, Tommy, also is I didn't do firefighter. I didn't do firefighter because other than 9/11, I don't think we lost more than 20 at one incident. There might be one or two maybe out there, but Billy G and Frank Lieb, they did 30 fires, you must know, and they did firefighter fatalities. These are all civilian fatalities, the ones that I did. But I'm familiar with your fires, so I'll be glad to comment on them. The thing about the Sofa Superstore, that's hard to say with a mouthful of crackers, is the chiefs that went down there to do that study and look at everything, what happened, that came back that I spoke to, said they were operating like it was in the 1950s. They stretch booster lines into structure fires. They're going in with a 1-inch booster line into today's structures. We talked about fire load and all that, and furnishings. And then the Sofa Superstore was that on steroids, because the amount of foam pillows and foam rubber and the synthetics, and then they're using, they're dropping 1,000 feet of 3-inch to feed the pumper, and all that stuff. So I think they had their tactical stuff was really lacking. It was old school, and it caught them by surprise, and it really bit them hard by losing 9 guys. They've come 360 degrees. They've came all the way around. Dave Carr went down there. He was the chief for a while until he passed. But he put a lot of good spin on that department. Boy, he was another smart guy we had in the service. Dave Carr, and now what's his name is a deputy there. He's always on social media, and he speaks all over the country. I can't think of his name. He's a deputy chief. Used to be an MMA fighter. He's got muscles like this. What the hell's his name? He's got a big mustache, not quite as big as yours. He's got him, and they were all them guys, all the veterans that were there. They all ended up in the gutter, and some of them on drugs, and some of them on our buddy Travis House, who was a fireman at that time. He ended up in the gutter, brought himself all the way back. He was a comedian. He went back on stage, and now he's going across country talking about PTSD and what happened to him and how he got out of it, and he's doing great. But so they've come. That department has come 360, and good for them that they learned those hard lessons, and they changed the way they did. But tactically, so that's the lesson. That's the biggest lesson with the Sofa Superstore is you got to look around town once in a while and say, you know what, we're not doing this the right way. And our good friend Brunacini told us when the guy got killed in the Southwest supermarket. Can't think of his name.
It'll come to me.
Yeah. So when they had the firefighter fatality in the Southwest supermarket, he said we approached that supermarket like we approach a 2-story house. He said it. He admitted it. Yeah. He said the size of the line that was pulled in. He says all of that. He said we approached it like a house. We didn't approach it like a large commercial building. He says, and it bit us. It bit us. So
I'm pretty sure that's on the list here.
Is that right?
Second one is the Houston Southwest Inn fire. And this one didn't get a lot of exposure, not as much as it probably should have. Lost 4 firefighters in that line of duty death.
Yeah, I don't know the circumstance of the Southwest Inn fire. I really don't.
It was a hotel fire, and I'm trying to remember what the contributing factors were. And I'm sure if I...
What city was it in, Tom?
Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Okay. Yeah, I don't have that one. What's next on the list?
Hackensack Ford dealership.
That one I know.
That happened right after I moved to New Mexico. And,
is that right? Was that 88?
Huh?
Is that 88? 1988?
80, maybe 84, 85.
Okay. Gotcha.
But that the thing that kind of highlighted the dangers of bowstring truss construction was that.
I think that's in their book, Billy and Frank. I think they put Hackensack Ford in the book.
I remember looking at
lightweight construction
videotape of that deal.
I saw the video.
It was weird because you could tell they had a job going in the attic. It was starting to poke out. But if you looked at like the drive-in doors for vehicles, it looked fine. You couldn't tell there was anything going on upstairs.
Yeah, that was a strange fire. And for the edification of the listening audience and the viewing audience, they had a lot of radio communication problems. The deputy in the street couldn't hear his guys inside. They couldn't get out for some reason, and a lot of what was going on was being heard on scanners. The buffs, the fire buffs, and the volunteers in the area heard everything on the scanner, but they couldn't hear each other on the fire ground. So they were calling the dispatcher in Hackensack and say, "Hey, I just heard the deputy say he wants the guys to get out, or they need another line." But nobody's responding to that because they don't hear them. And then the dispatcher would try to hit the tone and say, "Attention, all units on the fire ground," blah, blah. So they had a massive communication problem with their radios. And 5 firefighters perished in that fire when that lightweight bowstring came in from the attic and took them out. So, other lessons to be learned there with light. And then after that, that's when they passed the new code in New Jersey, and they added lightweight roof and floor signs for trusses, the truss signs. So if you go in a building now in New Jersey and there's a truss roof, it's a white triangle with a red border and there's a big R on it. And it's posted over the door, like a Home Depot and that kind of stuff. Commercial buildings. If they build a condo complex with all of that lightweight trusses, roofs, floors, then that'll be on the sign when you pull into the complex, like "Welcome to Happy Acres," and then that little sign will be on that instead of putting it on every door in the place. So that's one of those things that was one of those knee-jerk reactions, kind of that they said we got to mark every building in the city. They did it in Kansas City when they had the explosion too. They marked every building that had a fuel oil tank with NFPA 704s. So it goes on.
4, the Worcester Cold Storage Warehouse fire. 6 firefighters killed in that incident. There was a lot going on there.
And for you guys that don't know that fire, there's a deputy chief that worked in Worcester, Mass. And after the first team of 2 went in and they lost contact, they sent another team of 2 went in and lost contact. They sent the third team of 2 and lost contact. And he physically stood with his hands on the railings of the stairwell going up and said, "No more. No more." That was one of the largest acts of courage and bravery anyone has ever witnessed in our fire service. And the guys, he's got 100 guys outside, and they're getting ready to run him over. They got tools in their hand. "Chief, we're going in." And he said, "No, you're not. No, we think we lost 6. We're not losing any more." He probably saved another 50 guys by doing that. His name was Mike McNamee. And talk about courage under fire and all that stuff. But and that was a vacant cold storage warehouse fire. It was arson. There was a homeless couple living in there, and all the walls. It was a cold storage, so the walls had thick, like cork insulation, and that took off. And them guys got lost in there and turned around, and so we talk about learning lessons from fires. Within 3 or 4 months, they had the same exact fire in the same exact warehouse in New Jersey, in Jersey City, right by the entrance to the Holland Tunnel, leaving New Jersey, going into Manhattan on the Jersey City side. They had the same fire. And the lessons learned from Worcester played out in New Jersey. And I was in Jersey at the time when the chief came to the next chief's meeting and talked about it. He said, as soon as we pulled up, it was Worcester, Massachusetts all over again. He said, I wasn't having any of it. He said, we went to a defensive attack and blah, blah, blah. And everybody got home, after that. So like Tommy, you always say, we got to heed the lessons learned. if we don't heed those lessons, we're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So the beat goes on. What's the next one?
Phoenix Southwest Supermarket. That was Brett Tarver that
Thank you.
passed
Thank you. I knew it was started with a T. I couldn't remember his. God bless him, rest his soul. I couldn't remember his name. Brett Tarver. Yeah, Brett was a big dude, man. He looked like a linebacker for the Cardinals, big guy. And he went in there, he got disoriented, and the carbon monoxide was playing with his mind. They had their hands on him, I think, twice.
Yeah,
and he took four guys.
They had trouble with getting him out. And, one of the things that always amazed me of, trying to look at the transparency that the Phoenix Fire Department did on this incident, I don't think I've ever seen it paralleled anywhere. But Bruno was like, you know what, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. And
to anybody. Yeah.
They had all the area fire departments actually come in and visit the scene so they could see what some of the conditions were with the trouble of trying to get Brett out of the building.
But they had their hands on him, but he had such brain fog from the carbon monoxide. He was throwing him off. Like I said, he was a big guy. I think he was like 6'4", like 295. I mean, he looked like a linebacker, this guy. He fought him off a couple of times and then ran deeper into the building. And then when they finally found him, he was unfortunately, he succumbed. But Phoenix did an unbelievable job of publishing their investigation. And then they did a whole series of things. They did a bunch of articles. Steve Kreis, he did a bunch that said fast isn't that fast. And they said, you need, one fast team of four is not pulling that guy out, even on a good day and a slow guy. The first fast team get their hands on him. The next team comes in to help get him out. So maybe you need two teams of four. You need maybe 8 guys to get that guy out. So they did a whole series on fast isn't so fast. But they were very transparent. I agree.
The sixth one is the Greenwood Avenue row house fire in Washington, D.C. And again, I didn't do a lot of digging into this one. 2 firefighters lost their lives, and apparently the training focus on this identified basement fire tactics and flow path control were definitely contributors to the fatalities.
That's Tommy. That's not Cherry. That's not Cherry Road. That's a different fire in D.C.
Yeah, it's a different fire. So I think I got Cherry Road is actually number 10 in here, but it sounds like a similar. Sounds like a similar incident.
I think Cherry Road, if I remember right, I talked to Mike Donlin about that. For you guys, Mike Donlin was a deputy chief in Washington, and I think he said that a tidal wave of heat came over them, and I think there was propane or some gas or something had to do with the way they were overtaken in the house, whether it was a tank of propane or natural gas line let go or something kind of unforeseen.
They were coming in basement level, and I'm not sure whether they tried making the stairwell from upstairs to get down into the basement, and there was some sounded like non-coordinated ventilation going on. Flow path. I looked at that one quite a bit. We actually were able to go by and look at what's there now when I was buffing in D.C. one night, and they do a cool deal with recognizing those who had made the supreme sacrifice, even though they don't use game well boxes anymore. Generally, if there's been a fatality, there's a black game well box sitting in front of the building, not hooked up to anything, but just to recognize the fact, and a small plaque as to who died at that incident.
Is that a DC thing?
Yeah, they're doing another.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I've got pictures somewhere. They're doing another deal now where if there's been a line of duty death, they'll find a like a streetlight stanchion, and they put them pretty high up. They'll put a helmet up for whoever got killed. They do a good job with making sure.
Who's doing that? Who's doing
Fire,
that with the helmet?
DC Fire.
Oh, DC as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's driving that bus, but they're doing a good job with it.
Wow.
Number 7, the Yarnell Hill Fire in Arizona took out 19 wildland firefighters. Again, kind of something that you and I have had a chance to not talk a lot about, but I think the biggest contributing factor to Yarnell was extreme fire behavior. And the book you sent me, Fire Weather, takes a look at some of the extreme fire behavior we're seeing lately and how the impacts of global warming and greenhouse gases really affect what's going on. The book talks about a fire that occurred up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to where in the town that was outside where the fire started, they had what they described as flashover conditions going on in the great outdoors. And I can understand flashover occurring in a compartment fire, but not just out in the open. But that's what we're seeing. It was there in Canada. It was there at the Paradise Fire in California. And we're seeing stuff in the wildland that we've never seen before. I wish I was smart enough to tell you exactly what's doing it, but it's certainly something we've got to recognize to make sure that we're not losing, 10, 15, 20 guys at a shot.
Yeah, as a side note to the Yarnell fire, for the edification for our audience, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation has a line of duty team in every state called the Local Assistant State Team, or the LAST. And if one firefighter dies, or many, they will respond. Not automatically, they'll get in touch with the chief and say, "Do you want help?" And then they'll go there, and they go there with all kinds of tools. They have an honor guard commander to help the guys if they're going to do flag folding or casket duty, and he trains the guys. And if they need a chaplain, etc. There's a whole bunch of people on this team. A lot of the teams put on a volunteer accountant, because now the family is going to get the federal PSOB death benefit. Right now, it's like, I think it's $340,000. That's the most money some families will ever see in their whole life. What to do with the money? So they have a financial guy. It's a really great program. It's been around 20 years. I had the honor of being part of a 3-man team that wrote the program and then trained the first 50 teams from the 50 states back in 2004, 5, and 6. And it's working great. And it's to get the family really the primary job is to get the family that PSOB money benefit and get the paperwork right the first time, so it doesn't sit in a basket at the federal government, at the Department of Justice, so the family can get their money and don't have to worry about that. So the Arizona last team and had their shit together too. They were based out of not Tucson, not Phoenix, not Scottsdale, one of those towns anyway. And they had their team leader, real sharp guy. I think they were I think he was the chief in Apache, Arizona, but I forget what area that is. And anyway, they had a great state team. So they responded. And of course, 19 line of duties is just off the chart. And the wildland teams responded, to do incident management. And just, it was a cast of, they started a command post, was in the firehouse, and then they moved to a school. and they moved to 2 rooms in a school, and then they took the whole first floor of the school. And in that area of Arizona, they canceled school and everything. I mean, the whole area shut down when this happened. So they had the whole school, and the wildland guys came in, and they took over. They took over managing everything, managing the rest of the fire that wasn't out yet, and then managing the funerals and so the Arizona team, they put out a call for two more teams to come. So 2 more state last teams showed up, and when they showed up, they reported into the wildland guys, and they said, "Here's who we are. Here's what we do." They said, "Have a seat," and they kind of spent the whole day doing nothing. And the next morning, the wildland coordinating group and the incident commanders and that team, they met with them and said, "Here's what we need you guys to do. There's going to be 19 funerals. You got them." So these guys, they put 19 funerals together inside of a 7 or 8 day period. They did a yeoman's job. They were just about working around the clock for a 7-day week to get that done. They did an incredible job, and that's for no pay. The people on our last teams around the country, they do it from the heart. And so that the side story to Yarnell is three teams responded, and they did all that behind the scenes stuff.
Wow.
With no recognition. They just do it.
So the last one I got on the list that I want to talk about was the Keokuk, Iowa residential floor collapse. And I think this occurred in a close proximity to the Worcester fire. But there was
same day. Was it the same day?
It was the same day. It might have been within a day or two of each other.
It was either the same day or like the next night or something. It was right. Yeah, it didn't get the headlines because of Worcester. Yeah.
But I think back to the story. Keokuk Fire is a small department. Showed up with a very small career crew that started doing what they're doing. They made a grab on one of the kids and got the kid to the front of the building, and the firefighter who had the kid gave the kid to the chief.
He did.
They end up jumping in a police car and transporting the kid.
Yep.
There goes your entire command structure. Gone. And
the chief left the scene. The chief left the scene. But listen, something like that is very easy to Monday quarterback. Just hand it to the cop and say, go and put the kid on the back seat and stay at the seat. But, when you got a kid, a non-responsive child in your arms, what the hell? So, and Mark, I met Mark right after that happened through the fallen firefighters because he lost 3 guys that day. And he came to Emmitsburg the year after, and then a couple of more years, and we ran into each other. And he was never the same, that guy, and he never will be until he takes his last breath. He never will be. He was doing something good, bringing this baby to the hospital, and then by the time he got back, he lost 3 guys, and I think 1 or 2 more kids, right, in the house.
I think there were 2 more in the house, and the 3.
Like you said, when you say command structure, small department, the chief is out front. He's got 4 guys or 5 guys inside, but that's what they have. Yeah. He is the command structure, and he left the scene. So there was, the keyboard cowards had a lot to say about that, but they weren't standing there, and they weren't him. Right. They weren't him. When I met him the first time, I said, I can't imagine what was going through your mind when this was all going on. I can't imagine what was going through your mind.
So, I think in the flavor of what we wanted to do with putting together these line of duty death reports is it's a training tool. It's a very economical training tool. And between the discussions and maybe following the template to do a training at your department, heed the lessons. They're there. And, I hate to say, well, some of these guys died in vain because the departments didn't follow through with looking to make improvements and making sure all the safety protocols are being followed. But, there, but for the grace of God, go all of us, and let's take these lessons and make sure that our guys and your individual departments are more prepared for it.
Yeah, well said, brother. And you know what? Uh, uh, the, the 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 template. I hadn't seen that, and what a great idea that is. Kudos to the NIOSH gang for putting that together. In their effort to make us better. And so this is easy. You have a template, you have the reports, and any training officer worth their salt, or not even worth their salt, maybe worth their pepper, can sit down and put this together in a half hour. And you know what? You could do one of these a month. I mean, this doesn't have to be your training a theme of the month, because you're going to do ladders, you're going to do water supply, you're going to do what, but you could still do this in between. I mean, there's a way to do it, volunteer career or otherwise. There's always a way to fit this in. Every other Wednesday is safety hour. There's a way to do it. Every Sunday night is safety hour. Whatever. And you do one of these. And it's something to talk about and think about and start the conversation. And that's really what training is. You want to start the conversation and get people thinking a little bit. So yeah, nice job, Tommy. This was good. This was all Tommy today. Tommy took the lead and ran with the ball right down past the goal line and into the stands, and he's hanging out with the fans in there now and shit. So Tom, do you have any? You have a role? You have a role?
Since government shutdown, I think, has affected us one more time, but we last recorded on February 20th, and between then and now, there's no line of duty deaths listed on the USFA website. I'm thinking we're probably missing a couple, but right. Until the politicians pull their heads out of their ass and get DHS back up and running again, it's probably not going to be updated.
Right. All right. So, we certainly will add those to our list next time, because we're certainly not going to leave anybody out due to politics. That's for sure. So we'll do it on the next show when we have we'll have a lot of mischief and mayhem coming up next month. But how about the book? You got books? You got books?
I found an
It's time for book hour on the Backstep. What do you got?
A New York City book.
Services not required. John Calderon. Can you pick it up a little bit so we can see the rest of it? Boy, you stink at that, I got to tell you.
Thank you.
That looks like the teens or the 20s. That cover.
This is John Calderon, a FDNY guy, published Fire Apparatus Journal for years.
That's where I know the name from.
And there's some really weird New York City fire apparatus in this book, stuff you wouldn't expect to see. Airport crash units, brush trucks, air service units, old military stuff. At one time, New York City had quite the fleet of ambulances before the EMS merger. Some cool stuff. And if you're an apparatus buff, I would certainly recommend getting Services Not Required. And Ron, they tell me that's an old radio adage of like, if the IC wants to cancel a rescue coming in, let them know Services Not Required.
Services Not Required. Gotcha. All right, I never heard that, so I learned something here today. So I got two. I don't know if I did this last month. I don't remember if I did, but this is called The War Years. It's written by Bob Farrell. He was the captain of 31 truck that's in the same house with Engine 82, and it's called The War Years. And I mentioned this book to Tommy Richardson, the recent former chief of department, and he said Farrell was the real freaking deal. So he wrote all about his time in the big house, La Casa Grande, they called it, the big house in the South Bronx. Did a nice job putting this together. One of those you can't put it down. And he's still around.
I got to tell you,
yep,
it's a great book. After you recommended it, I didn't do the hard copy, but I got it on the Kindle. And I
Okay.
bet you I had that finished in a day and a half. Great
I couldn't put
stories.
it down either. Yeah, great stories. I know. And he's still around. If you guys heard of a company called Firehooks Unlimited, that's Bob's company. And I think he's pushing 90 and he's still around, this guy. And considering they didn't wear a mask at all in the South Bronx in the 60s and 70s, he's still around. God bless him. He's an Iron Man. I just read this over the last week, 3 nights. I couldn't put it down. This is the book's called Red Platoon, and it's Clinton Romesha was a sergeant in the Army and a Medal of Honor recipient, and he was caught in a 10-hour gunfight in a security base in Afghanistan. It was the worst placed strategic security base they had overseas. It was in a valley surrounded by mountains, and the enemy had a crow's nest all around 360 looking down on these guys. They take pot shots at them every day, and everybody was good. And then they made the big assault, and this is about the assault. I will tell you, if you read this book, you will be in the middle of the battle. The sergeant takes you right into the middle. It's 10 hours. It's a 10-hour battle. He takes you right into the middle of it. It's called Red Platoon. I got this from Mike Rowe, the guy that does Dirty Jobs on the Discovery. He has a podcast, and he was touting this on the podcast. He said, I just had a guy on. He says he wrote this book called Red Platoon by Clinton Romesha, Medal of Honor recipient. And it was funny because I couldn't picture the guy, but then when there's a picture in the back of the president putting it on him, I recognized him from the news. Let me see if I get the picture up. I remember his face and getting the medal. So, of course, as humble as every other Medal of Honor recipient, this is not mine, belongs to my team. You know, they're all alike. I've met 3 or 4 of them that have gotten this medal. They all talk the same exact way. Everybody was part of it. It was part of my team. It's not mine, blah, blah, blah. But you will be sitting in the middle of that compound, protecting it, watching how they protected it. They lost 8 guys that day. But a fascinating story. And he was given that medal based on that book. So,
well, glad we kept it under an hour today.
Yeah, we try to keep it under an hour, but here we are about $1.17, almost 18. So with that, nice to see you, Thomas, and nice to see everybody out there in TV land. Stay with us for the year. Like I said, we're going to have next month is going to be mayhem and mischief. We're having Duffy and Avillo on. It's going to be nuts. But we'll try to talk about a couple of important things if we can get through all the sarcasm and all the chop busting and all that stuff. So in the meantime, until we're back up with you again on the Backstep, remember, be safe, slow down, buckle up, wear your mask, wear your helmet, use the chin strap, drive because you got to get there. Drive with due regard to get there, and hug your family and tell them you love them, man, because that's what it's all about. You know, hug them tight with every night, kind of thing. So with that, I'll say goodnight to my friend Tom, and be safe, everybody.